And good evening.
Good
evening. Nice to be with you here this evening. As Girma said, my name is Rob Sheehan. My main job here at the University of Maryland is as the Academic Director of the Executive MBA Program. But I do some other things as well. For example, this semester I'm teaching a course that Holland's taking on the strategic management for nonprofit and public organizations. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But the most important thing I wanted to say tonight was just how excited I am for you and for the organizations that you're going to be working with this semester. I've had the chance to be an advisor to other groups in past years. I like to try to come to the end of the year presentations every year to hear about all the cool stuff you end up doing and how much you really help. So thank you for volunteering your time to help out and to serve and help make a difference. I think it'll be great. I don't know when it's scheduled, Guillermo, their final reports, but I'm going to try to get there.
December 13th.
Okay, Tuesday night. I know just where I'll be. I'll be here. So I'll look forward to hearing how you did. A couple of other things. I've been at the university since 2001. Prior to that, though, I spent my entire career working in the nonprofit field for 20 years. My PhD is from Ohio State, and my PhD focused on nonprofits. I've done a lot of consulting over the last 30 years with nonprofits, and as Holland knows, I've written a book on strategy for nonprofits, which he gets to read in my class. So that's my background. Having said that, we can make a copy of this available to these guys, right? Mm-hmm. So I want you to know there's my contact information. If, as the term is going on, you have questions about the nonprofit. I know you have advisors. If you have questions about what's going on in your with your particular project, and you think I could help because of my background, don't hesitate to drop me an email, give me a call. We can spend up some time to meet, and I'm happy to help you out because I have had that kind of experience. I guess the only other thing I'll say before we jump in is that we are taping this, and so keep that in mind. And that I just have a brief presentation. I don't have a long speech to give to you, so you can applaud now if you want. No, I'm just kidding. Mostly what I'm interested in knowing is what questions you have of me and how, based on my background, I might be able to help you with what you're diving into. So having said that, Melissa, when she asked me to first do this, she thought, well, you know what, I want them to help learn the language of nonprofits. Like, what is the language of nonprofits? A lot of them may not have had experience working with nonprofits, so that's what we call this. But let me ask first, how many of you have either been a volunteer or done some kind of work with a nonprofit before? Okay, great. So a lot of you know some things. Maybe a lot of you know a lot. So when we go through these slides, I want you to feel free to pitch in and jump in and talk about some of these different aspects of what we're saying, the language of nonprofits. Let's just start with the beginning. What a bad term, nonprofit, right? To describe a category of organizations by what it's not, right? What a bad idea. But nobody's been able to come up with a better term that is stuck. Peter Drucker, the famous management guru, he tried to promote, when he was alive, tried to promote social sector, or the social sector. But people really haven't picked up on that. Internationally, if any of you have international experience, pretty widely known as what? NGOs. Well, okay, again, describing it as something we're not, right? Well, we're not profit, we're not government. What are we? Not for profit would be maybe a little bit better, but it's not a good term. In my dissertation, I tried calling us philanthropic organizations. Has that stuck? No, right? So, nonprofit is kind of what we're stuck with. If any of you can come up with a name that can stick, would be helpful, and maybe can become famous at the same time. I don't know. One reason it's not a good term is because nonprofits should produce surpluses. Now, it'll be interesting when you get into your organizations finding out about, whether or not they do produce surpluses. Because if they don't, you kind of got two choices, right? Nobody ends up on zero, like hardly ever. So you want to aim at making a little money every year that you can put away, and save for the future, that kind of way. Anyway, So we do produce surpluses. Questions about that? Pretty straightforward stuff. We're nonprofits. All right. So if nonprofits don't really make a profit, they make surpluses. What do they exist for? And I suggest that the purpose that we serve is to make a difference in society. All right? So when you go into your organizations and you look at the missions of your organizations, which maybe you've looked at already, somehow they're trying to make a difference in society. But the thing that is challenging with nonprofits is that measuring their performance. How do you measure their performance, right? You would think the measurement would be something around how well you accomplish your mission, if that's your purpose, but it's a really challenging and difficult thing to do. So it's something that will be interesting, because I'm sure what your organizations want you to do is to go in and help that organization make more of a difference. But how do they know? Right? How do they know that they're really doing that or not? What kind of metrics do they use? What kind of measurements do they use? I think it will be interesting as you get in there to hear them talk about their performance in different ways. You might hear them talking about, well, we need to do more of this, we need to do more of that. But how do they really know they're accomplishing their mission? It is a challenging aspect of the whole nonprofit field to try to figure that out. Funding. This is a huge deal in the nonprofit world. Are any of you working on projects that deal with helping to get better funding for the organization? Yes? So what are some examples?
So I had to create a value proposition for an organization, and that is supposed to get them better funding. We use that value proposition as a channel to get better funding for the organization. Okay, so you're going to help them come up with what that value proposition is so they can promote them more. How about some of the others? Yes?
I'm working for an organization that hasn't changed, that gets a majority of their funding through conferences, but they haven't changed their pricing structure since the mid-90s. So working with them to figure out where their price point should be, things like that.
Man, what a great project. So many nonprofits that do fees for service don't look at their prices once every 15 years, right? So maybe you can leave them with a template about how they can do that better in the future.
Oh, well, the group I'm working with is, well, they work with restaurants and the sales that they make of a certain type of product. And some of the proceeds from those sales go to the organization, which is then used in Africa.
Oh, okay. Cool. So you're helping them with that aspect of it. Anybody else that I missed? Yeah.
Ours is just looking, our project is to get better funding and how they can tap more users and get the name out there.
Okay. Yeah, somehow to get better funding. I know I was advising a team last year, and what they were asked to do was to set up a new corporate fundraising process. And it's interesting because I'm on the mailing list of this organization, and just last week I got a mailer all about this big event that this organization is having that's promoting their corporate partners. So I was like, oh, it really helps. So funding is a huge deal. While some do fees for service, like the example you're talking about, and a lot of them do, most of them heavily rely on philanthropic donations. The pressures to raise money, you ask a nonprofit executive director what their toughest challenge is, 9 times out of 10, they'll tell you raising money. So it's not a surprise at all you guys are doing some things in the area of helping them figure out how to do something with their funding. Many of us are very, very worried about what's going to happen, especially during the next 3 to 5 years, given the serious cutbacks that are going to occur in government funding. Because a lot of nonprofits basically do the work of government through government-funded grants. But with the cuts that we know are going to come, that's going to become a lot more difficult. So you'll hear people talking about that, I'm sure, in your organizations. Now, did any of you guys see in the news just 2 days ago some of the detail around President Obama's his new jobs program? Did you see how he plans to get the money for that? Anybody see that? Yeah.
Like transportation, building, like like building roads and stuff like that?
Well, that's how he wants to spend the money to help create some more jobs. It's one of the ways it was, but you got to get money to pay for that. So where's the money going to come from for that? Anybody see this?
Didn't he say in Ohio he wanted to, or he hinted that he wanted to increase taxes on the super wealthy?
Well, not just super wealthy, right? So the latest that I heard was that the proposal says that it would limit deductions. It would limit itemized deductions for families making over $250,000 a year or individuals making $200,000 a year. So it would limit itemized deductions on those people. Well, I don't know how well you know your tax code, but the nonprofit community, within 24 hours was already screaming, that's going to hurt us badly, because they believe, I have a little counter to that, but they believe, a lot of nonprofits believe that if you limit the itemized deduction for charitable donations, that people won't give as much in contributions. Because, right now, when you make a contribution, then you can at least lower your income at which you're taxed. But this is saying that all of your itemized deductions, mortgage, medical, charitable donations, that would be limited. There'd be a cap on that. And so that's something also that you'll hear people talking about. So the funding challenges were huge before the downturn hit. But the last couple of years, and now even more so after these other cuts are going to come in, I think we're going to see more nonprofits fold. We're going to see more people not get the services that they need. And again, this is just the environment that you're going to be dealing with, and I want to make sure that you're up on that. So, questions about this? Yeah.
I have a question. So, these nonprofits generally do fund, carry out services the government doesn't want to, but how come businesses such as consulting don't seem to be feeling the same type of stress as nonprofits when they also kind of do the same thing for government organizations? They're like ramping up, to complete projects that government workers can't do.
It's a great question, and it will also be interesting to see in this region what happens to government contractors and defense contractors. Now, one of the Smith School's big clients that I work with is a company called SAIC. You guys ever heard of them? I never heard of them until I became a client, but they are a major defense contractor, do a lot of work for the government, and they've had major cutbacks in the last 18 months, getting ready for, because we know that defense spending is going to go down, and they just had another huge round 6 weeks ago as a result of the budget deal that was done. So a lot of, Lockheed Martin, another big client of the Smith School, they're going through the same kinds of things. So I think there are pockets of consulting firms and other firms that are going to be able to maybe weather this next round of cuts, but there are a lot, especially in this region, that won't. So I think you're going to see it on a case-by-case basis. Good question. Other questions? All right. What else besides funding do we need to pay attention to? Volunteers. And again, I bet a number of you have been volunteers in your life in the nonprofit world. I'll tell you a couple of things especially to keep in mind when you're thinking about this aspect of nonprofits. I'm not exactly sure what your projects are, but the one group that I advised last year, and then a couple of other people stopped by, just asked for friendly advice from time to time, they were asked to put together new procedures or policies or systems that were going to be implemented by volunteers. Now, if that's what's going to happen, you've got to be really careful about how sophisticated of a system you put together. Like a couple of guys last year, very smart, knew a lot about Excel and how to create different kinds of systems and whatnot. And the nonprofit had asked them to put together a new comprehensive evaluation program for that nonprofit. And they were explaining to me what they were going to do. And it sounded really cool. And then they told me that it had to be managed by volunteers. And I said, ooh, that's a challenge. They said, what, let's talk about that more. Well, it was going to be managed by somebody who was going to come in and implement this 2 hours a week. And then what if they missed that week? So all of a sudden, these guys went back to the organization and asked them more about it. They said, yeah, you better not make it so sophisticated. You better kind of make it simple and basic, something we can use, but that our volunteers can actually utilize. So just something to watch out for if you get into a situation. Find out, how, because, as consultants, we come in, we do our stuff, and then we leave, right? We leave them with something that they're going to need to be able to really implement and use, in real time. So you got to find out who's going to be doing that, who's the audience, who's going to be taking my work and implementing it over time after I leave. And if it's going to be some volunteers, then great. Maybe try to meet them, find out what works for them, that kind of thing. I say that proper management of volunteers is important for them to be used effectively. Many nonprofits don't manage their volunteers very well. They think about volunteers as, well, this is cheap labor. We can just kind of bring them in, tell them a couple of things, and try to rely on them to do the work that we need them to do. As it turns out, management, it takes a lot of time and effort. Helping somebody really understand their job, following up with them, giving them the proper training. So something for you to also watch for with your projects to make sure that if you're going to leave something behind, part of what you do is to give proper training to the volunteers who might need to questions about that? Yeah.
Would you manage volunteers who are not as regular as, let's say, full-time or part-time employees? Because some volunteers might only do this on a I have time basis. So, do you have any ideas of how to work around that?
Yeah, and again, I did this for many years, and here are the things I learned about working with volunteers. And again, very similar. What year are you guys anyway? Most of you.
It's like a huge mix.
It's a huge mix? Okay, so I don't know if you've had any management classes yet or not, all right? But if you have or when you do, here's some of the things that you learn about. It's whether somebody's paid or unpaid. Step one, let's get the expectations straight, right? Like, what do I expect of you? If I'm a nonprofit executive director and you want to volunteer, and you say, yeah, Rob, I'd like to volunteer for an organization. I say, great. Let me help you understand what I would expect if you want to volunteer in this kind of situation. I tell you the number of hours I expect, the specific responsibilities. And if you said, I can't put that much time in, maybe we find something else for you to do. Or maybe we say, you know what, we really appreciate you offering to volunteer, but an hour a week really isn't going to be able to help us. Now, hopefully a lot of places, they can fit somebody based on their skills, their talents, and their availability into something. But you got to have those expectations straight right from the beginning. Once you have the expectations straight, then you got to provide them with some training. Okay, here's how you need to go about this kind of job, and what you would need to do. We try to think of some examples of different kind of volunteer things I've done, but as simple as working for a day at a homeless shelter. I remember going in and somebody saying, look, here are things you need to do throughout the day. And a few simple tasks, but they show you the ropes, they show you what to do, lay out the expectations, and then you do it. Does that help? Yeah. Other questions? All right, board of directors. You'll probably hear people talk about the organization's board of directors. Depending on the kind of project you're working on, they may or may not be important, specifically to your special project. But like I say here, like publicly traded companies, nonprofits have a board of directors. They are responsible, they have the legal and financial responsibility of overseeing everything that the organization does. So just like a corporate board of directors has that responsibility, except in the nonprofit world, they're not paid. So they're volunteers, maybe something, part of their volunteer job. In addition to doing their job of the oversight of the nonprofit, they also usually help carry out some of the responsibilities. So they're not only monitoring what's going on, but they're also helping the staff do the work of the nonprofit. The biggest place that they often give help is in raising money. So if you're doing anything around like value proposition, pricing, etc., the volunteers maybe and the board members may be very involved in overseeing that. For example, in your situation with the pricing, I would guess that the board members are going to have to approve any changes in pricing that you all come up with. So, you know, it might be an interesting question to ask when you're working in your organization. You know, is what I'm working on, is this going to have to get approved by anybody? Or is it just sort of, you know, whatever I come up with, you as my, because they'll have a contact for you, right? Whoever your contact is, you know, whatever I give you, are you just going to kind of be able to run with? If it's something that the board of directors is going to have to approve, then that's a helpful thing to know. You want to ask questions about, and I'm thinking in the pricing area because that's such a critical thing. Well, are there board members we should talk with as we're thinking about what the pricing should be? Who are the stakeholders that we should consider as we're looking at that question? That might be a helpful thing to think about. Questions about boards? Sizes, this probably doesn't surprise you. Nonprofits can be gigantic. I think one of the largest ones in the country is AARP, located here in the DC area. Tens of thousands of members, multi-million-dollar budget. I don't know if you've ever seen their building in downtown. Gigantic, immaculate facility. So you've got them on the one hand, and then you've got, you know, other nonprofits that may be a couple of people. The vast majority of nonprofits in the country, by the way, have budgets of less than $25,000 a year. I don't know what yours are, but my guess is that most of yours are of the smaller variety that we're trying to help out. But they can be of all sizes and different levels of sophistication, right? You may find some that you're working with that when you're talking about infrastructure, whether it's computers, phone systems, Blackberries, whatever, are fairly sophisticated, and others that are more like, you know, being run out of somebody's, you know, apartment or something, with not much infrastructure at all. So it will vary widely. Figuring out what the resources are can be a helpful thing, just so you understand what their capacity will be to run the kind of project that you want to implement. Questions about this? All right, this is important. Values. And again, these may all be things you guys already know. But most people, whether they're staff or volunteers, get into working for a nonprofit because they want to make a difference in the world. They care about making a difference. They care about other people. So they're very mission-driven. I'll say almost sometimes to a fault, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But very mission-driven. Why are we here? We're here to make a difference for these people. That's all they think about. That's all that drives them. And you know, sometimes very zealous about that, which is cool. You know, for the nonprofits that I worked for, I was very zealous about them, and I'm still a volunteer for both of them. So, you know, I was zealous then, I'm zealous now. So you'll see that kind of thing. Trust and ethics, very important in the nonprofit world. So you'll hear people talking about that. How much they want to be connected to the organization, almost a personal extension of themselves, that they care so much, they're there to make a difference. It's sort of like, you know, a home to them, and a family in that way. You'll hear those kinds of things as you talk to people about values. I'll use this to segue into the next slide, and that is that they are so passionate about their values and about making a difference that sometimes it can lead them to taking on practices that aren't done in the most efficient ways. All right? So this is where it's important for you to know what you're getting into as business students, because you've heard all these business practices. And I'm going to caution you to be careful about how you talk with them about these business practices you've learned that you're bringing into their organization. On one hand, they asked for it. Like they said, oh yes, please, we want to have these really smart students come in and give us ideas on best practices and apply these leading edge ideas on how we can be more effective. But on the other hand, the language and the values of business from the perspective of a lot of nonprofit people is either bad or isn't the right fit. All right? So for example, this might be the most important thing that I have to tell you all night. Be careful not to say, this place needs to be run more like a business. It offends a lot of nonprofit people. What do you think, not all, but a lot of nonprofit people hear, what do they make up in their heads when they hear somebody say that? What might you imagine, yeah?
Think of like the greedy business person, hoarding cash.
Okay, very good. Greedy business person, hoarding cash, all about money, right? What else might you be? Cutthroat, very good. Lack of compassion. Okay, great, you guys got that. So these are the kinds of images that can conjure up in their minds when they think about, you should be run more like a business. When instead, maybe what the person who says that means is, I'm going to give some examples that are real, but on the outskirts of what you'll find in most nonprofits. Maybe what the person who said this place should be run more like a business, what they mean is, hey, before we have a meeting, maybe somebody should have an agenda. Hey, maybe we should have a budget. I got an idea. Maybe we should track things, using like an Excel spreadsheet of statistics. Maybe those are the kinds of things they mean. And those may be the kind of ideas that you come up with. A new accounting system that can help us really track our, so we know where and how we're spending our money. Oh, that sounds very reasonable. Yeah, we should know how to do that. So you have to be careful about how you kind of bring these ideas along and how you share them so they don't hear a greedy businessman. Yeah, we don't care about money. Yeah, maybe better. I see how we can apply some ideas we've learned in our marketing course to better promote your fundraising event. Oh, you're going to help us raise more money? Good, I want that idea. Show them how, your thoughts are connected to their mission, making a difference. Because after all, you guys wouldn't be doing this if that's not what you care about. You want to make a difference. You want to help them make even more of a difference. So you want to make sure you set that as the context. We can raise more money, which is going to help us serve more people if we think about doing it this way. We're going to save money and be more efficient if we take on and use some of these tools that I learned in business school about how to do a better job. Think about it in that kind of way. There are, I think, all of the business principles that you learn in business school can be applied in the nonprofit arena. You just might need to tweak them some. So keep that in mind. They don't always apply exactly the same way. They'll be done a little bit differently depending on what that particular principle is. So, that's all I got. All right? Little language on nonprofits. Some tips, some different ways the cultures are different. Some of the words they use are a little bit different. Some ideas to keep in mind as you're going out there. Questions you all have? Yeah.
I'm a policy student and could use a little clarification on the difference between transformational versus transactional and how that applies in this nonprofit.
Great. I kind of jumped over that one. Well, it's something that maybe everybody in the room has. You guys know the distinction between transformational leadership and transactional leadership? Okay. So basically, transactional leadership is, to break it down, it's like, I'm going to pay you money, so you're going to do a particular task. Or in politics, a transaction might be, you need me to vote for your particular bill, I want to see it on your committee. It's transactional. And transactional leadership isn't all bad. I mean, you need to make transactions, right? We need to make deals about different things. Transformational leadership, though, is when people look at their higher aspirations. And they say, I ask questions like, why are we here? What difference do we want to make? What's our vision for the future? How do you see that unfolding? And they have a dialogue with one another about things that they care about. And by having that dialogue, together they sort of enrich the future that they're trying to create together. And that's what leads to transformation.
And creating buy-in.
Yeah, although here's what's interesting. It's creating what looks like buy-in without selling something. Because selling something is transactional. Sharing something, where it's totally okay if you don't buy it, that's more transformational. So if I sit down with a friend of mine, flashback, and say, Harold, a bunch of us in the community are working on these ideas which can really help, the United Way. And as you know, the United Way funds many of the important nonprofits in the community. And it would be awesome if you could help us, work on this particular project that's going to help improve the lives of children, families, the elderly, etc. And here's what we're doing. And Harold says, wow, that sounds really cool. Let me tell you what I'm working on. I am sold out about the importance of mentors for kids in our schools. And I'm going to tell you, I'm spending 99% of my free time doing that. How would you like to be a mentor, Rob? Right? So we're sharing with each other things we care about, and maybe I want to be a mentor. Maybe he wants to do my United Way thing because he sees a way, but maybe not. So it's okay because we're both doing things for the community that we care about. But yeah, so it can look like buy-in because we both actually bought without having to. Is that? Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
What happens if we have completely different views from our clients on how to kind of handle the problem, so to speak? As in, I was once trying to work with a nonprofit that was trying to raise money. I know that one of the clients said was giving us news articles on how nonprofits kept getting government grants, which was not applicable to what he was doing, but it was just so amazed by the idea that grants were given away that he kind of put us in a position where we couldn't do anything because, yes, grants are given away, but it's a completely different issue from what he was trying to do.
Classic consulting problem. What's interesting to me is that kind of thing even happens when you're being paid as a consultant, right? They pay you money, they bring you in, they ask you to help with this problem, and you keep giving them what you think are, what you actually know are ideas that could really help them, and yet they kind of refuse to listen. But it's the challenge. And it's especially a challenge with you guys as volunteers, right? Because, at least they don't have a lot of skin in the game in particular. I would say take that on as a challenge. How can I get these guys to hear? What can I do to inspire them, to show them, to demonstrate to them that the ideas that I'm working on can really help them? I would think of it as a really important problem to try to solve. And I bet all of you will run into it in one way or the other. If at the end of the day you're unable to, it's really unfortunate, but hopefully at least a good learning experience for you in trying to help convince themselves of that. And a good learning experience for you if you ever want to do more consulting in the future. To say, okay, I got to figure out, how do I sell my ideas? How do I share my ideas so they'll, buy in? So it's a challenging one. If you run up against it, obviously talk to your advisors about it. And if you ever want to come and brainstorm with me, I'm happy to help you. Yeah.
I have a question, and this is something that I faced during my summer internship, which I did with a nonprofit. So how do you decide who the consumer, and I'm putting that in business terms, of the nonprofit is, or whom you're trying to cater to? Is it the board, or is it of course your target demographic that you're trying to reach, or is it the funders who have to give you the money? So
Yeah, do you guys know the book Flawless Consulting? You don't have any time to read it, but if you wanted to, I recommend it. It's by a guy named Peter Block, and he provides tips on how you go about a consulting assignment. And one of the first questions that every consultant has to make sure they have an answer to who's the customer. That you get clear for who is the customer. And it's, I'm thinking about our guest speaker tonight in class, although I don't think I can give this exact question. Is it the CEO? Is it the person who hired you and brought you in? Is it the board? Is it the people that they serve? You got to get that clear. Now, my main answer to the who the customer question is who has the authority to implement the ideas that I'm going to be leaving behind. Because if I want to make a difference in the organization, then I want to know. That. So in class we have tonight, the class that Holland's taking with me, is that we have the COO of a fairly large nonprofit organization, $20 million budget, 80 people, and she's the COO. She brought me in to be the consultant to do their strategic planning, right? And so the question I kept asking her all along the process was, what's Mike think? What's Mike think? The CEO, right? I mean, she says, well, that's a good question. I better go check in with him. And, even though she was the main one that brought me in, I was interviewed by him before I was hired. So I realized he was the customer. He was the client. He was the guy that if it didn't fly, we could end up doing all this work over all these months. I'd leave, and they would do nothing with what I was doing. So that's how I answered the question. Now you can get a little more, I don't know, philosophical about it and say, well, the customer are really the people that they're serving, and whatever I do here, I mean, think about them. I think that is the best way to think about it is, I want to make a difference for the people that they're serving or the cause that they're serving. But in terms of getting your work implemented, you got to make sure you understand who the decision makers are. Maybe it's the board of directors. Maybe it's the CEO. Maybe it's a program person who brought you in. That's how I answer that. Other questions? Yeah.
What do you think is a good way to target sponsorship or partnership with a for-profit?
Okay, a couple different tips I'd give you. First, you would want to do a little research. Go to that for-profit's website, and most of them, if they do philanthropy, they'll explain what they do. So you want to look for a match. This is what you're tasked with doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what, again, I don't know how much time you have, but there's a great organization that's got a big office in DC called the Foundation Center. And you can go down there for free, use their resources. They've got a computer system that's got information on grants that companies and foundations have done for different causes. They can help teach you how to use that. So, for example, one nonprofit that I worked for 20 years ago, my main job was to find funding sources for companies or foundations that did leadership programs for college students. So I used this organization's database to find out who those kinds of organizations were. And then I went after the ones that gave away the most money in that particular area. They had it listed as one of their priorities. I knew that, and I could go to them. Some people make the mistake of thinking that well, I'm just going to go to the biggest companies I can possibly go to because they have a lot of money, and I'm going to ask them for money. Or go to the people that give away the most money. But you really have to find out what their stated interests are to see if, in fact, they would be a good prospect for you. So I'd start with the website. If you have time to get more sophisticated, go down to the Foundation Center. You can look on their website and see if they would have anything that would help you.
They have a great website. That website has single-handedly started up new nonprofits for 3 of my friends over the last 5 or 6 years. They just have great resources.
And they have a recent podcast on there that I did. So it's got to be a good organization, right? No, they're very, very nice. Good people. I know the director there pretty well. So like you said, it's a great resource. That's what I would do. That's what I think I would do. Other questions, comments? Still food left.
A ton.
All right, guys, look. You'll get a copy of this. You'll know how to get a hold of me. My office is in this building. Email me, set up a time to come by if you need to. If you have other questions, don't hesitate to stop by. I wish you luck. I'm excited to see you on December 13th, to see and hear the things you came up with. Good luck. And thank you on behalf of the university. You're being great ambassadors for the university. You're going to make a difference, and that's really helpful. So, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen.